Today on the Hobby Bench, I'll be talking about Cyber Knight's Flashpoint from Treese Brothers. So I'm going to be doing some infrequent videos here, just giving a shout out some PC games that I play once in a while. And unfortunately, I try to avoid playing a lot of these games because really it just cuts way too deep into my painting time. So probably this won't be any regular content, but I want to talk about Cyber Knight Flashpoint. It's from the Treese Brothers. It's available now on Steam as an early access game. Right now, actually, it's pretty much the full game that you can get. So I recommend you, if you can, just go ahead and download it. Don't let that early access throw you off. But the full release will be put out in early June. Essentially, it's an XCOM-like tactical turn-based shooter. And later on that is these stealth and security challenges, much like what you had in Invisible Incorporated. It's a classic cyberpunk setting. They have hacking, street samurai, cybernetic implant. Basically, you're managing a crew to gain money and notoriety. And there is going to be a story mode that hasn't been released yet, but they have right now, a sort of available. Is this like a general career mode, with some story elements thrown in? I've been really enjoying it a lot. It sparked my interest in visiting some other cyberpunk war games, that I've had. It's been languishing on the shelf, like Exploit Zero and Reality's Edge. And, there's some interesting mechanics here in the game. I think I might pour it over to the skirmish rule sets, especially the idea of contacts and patrons, possibly managing relations along different factions. And so I might explore looking at some rules, maybe drafting something like that and put into that. Possibly you're going to be seeing some more cyberpunk painting, maybe on the bench in the future, because I've really been digging this. So like XCOM, you're managing a crew and you're trying to expand your base of operations just, by tackling missions. And you're really doing this for cash, favors and loot. For the career mode, most of the missions actually are procedurally generated. You have a couple of story missions that are dabbled in there, but typically you'll have a clear objective. You have a hacker and you've got to insert a virus into a console, or you're stealing particular assets. You're eliminating a particular target. You might be acting as a bodyguard to extract a VIP, or just general theft of just trying to get as much hands on the stuff that you can before the place is crawling with security. And I really sort of enjoy playing this, so I give it a little bit more of a deeper look. So first off, I'm going to say my computer is a potato. I had to turn down the bells and whistles just to try to get a decent frame rate to show this game off. And so you start up your crew. This is a basic isometric view of gameplay. And just to show you here that you'll see that your objective, that'll be sort of highlighted. And you can sort of just click over there. They have a menu off there on the left screen, including, some areas where you can extract. And so this just gives you a general layout. Okay, this is where you need to go. This is where you need to get out. And you'll have your characters that you can go through and select. And there'll be an initiative rating. In addition to this, too, you can, of course, see various security devices. You have laser wires and cameras. We have, motion sensors, and, of course, your guards. And if you click on them, you can sort of see a viewpoint there of their view of what they can see in some areas, that might be a little bit possibly hidden. There's a different shade. And so you're going to try to navigate, where to go. And you'll see these little action points. You have a certain amount of action points. I can see there, it takes about half my action points to move there. And if you move in closer, you can just sort of see, okay, if I do this, I'll be seen or I'll be heard. And you can just sort of sometimes carefully see about, moving in and sort of balancing that movement there. And of course, if you're sneaking, it's just much more quieter. If you're running, you can get more action points. You can move faster, but you're a little bit more louder. So I'm going to just try to move up here. And you have various abilities that you can use. These are usually one-shot abilities that they'll reuse after a certain amount of time. Here I'm going to use an anticipation. I'm just going to try to figure out where the guard is going to go. And that's the specialized skill of this class that I have. It's more of a stealth thief type. And so what's interesting too is you can play around the turn order and the initiative, usually by delaying actions or you'd be yielding to other teammates. And, this can give you a chance here. Well, in this case here, I might just wait and just let this guard move and basically get out of the way. So then I can sort of move unimpeded. It can be a little bit louder. And it goes back to my character again. You can sort of see where they're facing off. So I said, okay, that looks good. So I'm going to use my character again, go back to that. I'm going to use a little jam kit and just sort of select out some devices here. I'm going to get rid of this motion sensor, shut that off. So that allows the rest of the team to scoot up and not be detected. And what you'll see here on the top right part of the screen is like sort of the security level. And so, as I'm moving along and creating more noise, and, doing things or getting caught on camera, or if guards see me, that level is going to increase and you can get higher security levels. And you can see traditional XCOM here. You can move up there. You can see up against a wall. It's a full shield. There's full cover. If I'm getting up in near these benches, then it's half cover. You can see like half shield. So it's a lot of nice little icons to sort of show, what's going on. So I'm going to have my guy run up there, my Cyber Knight, my main character in a way. So the rest of my crew too are going to move in. And they all have like different skills. Some are a little bit more combat oriented. Some are a little bit of a mix, between some stealth, or maybe they have things that manipulate guards. You'll have others that are just much more stealth based, or even just, hackers. Their primary thing is to, hack into equipment and get rid of cameras and shut those off, or actually get into computer consoles and go through hacking missions. And I'll show that a little bit later. So you can move my crew, and this is a little bit of a fog of war here too. As you're moving in, you're sort of detecting more and more guys that sort of pop up. And, they weren't there before, but as I move through the rooms in the building, then I can sort of see, okay, now there's more guys here. I got to sort of watch out what's going on. Regardless of what you're doing, every turn you will increase your security level. So here, okay, cameras popping through. Okay, fortunately, our guys ducked down. They were in some cover, so they weren't detected yet. But you have to sort of manage that because I said, as it moves up, well, then you'll have guards that are on the map will start to go out and hunt you down. And if it keeps encroaching higher and higher, you'll actually have reinforcements start moving in. So I'm going to use the ability of my guy here. I'm going to use basically a security scramble, and I'm going to just go through and highlight this motion, or actually this long range camera, and shut that down. And so that can give me a little bit more of a break. And as I mentioned, that you can, part of this is sort of manipulating the turn order. I'm going to try to let these other guards do some stuff so I can go back to my main thief class there. And then they can go ahead and use their ability to shut down some cameras. And that gives me a little bit of some room to go through. Now I'm going to be a little bit louder here. I'm just going to run in and get that guard's attention. But I'm going to move in quickly and silently, use some melee attack. It's very quiet and just try to dispatch them. I'm lucky about that. So they're sort of exposed, but hopefully nobody will be turned towards my way there. And I said, they all have different abilities. This is sort of neat, this Scourge here. They have a biomimic ability. They can change their physical appearance, their biometrics, so they don't trigger cameras. And they sort of basically look like normal personnel running around. So I'm going to have him probably going a little bit further in this area here and just, try to get some loot and sort of move up a little bit. And that's pretty much a large part of the game here, is that you're just sort of going through and sort of managing what happens, just trying to avoid triggering a lot of cameras, try to use some stealth elements, try to quietly either shift attention away of certain enemies or try to dispatch them very carefully. And so that's a key part of the game, is try to keep that security level down, much like, they had an invisible ink before it gets too high, and then, you've got trouble. But regardless, every turn, they're going to sort of feel like, hey, there's some type of anomaly in our quantum sensing here. There's something that's going on. So it will always keep encroaching up. And so you'll always have this timeline here. You can see now I'm just going to go up and loot some equipment and some stuff out of some files, whatever, out of these loot boxes. They'll have those around. And that's part of the things that you sort of want to do a little bit as a side mission here. Just try to keep my guys in cover. I'm probably have that guy maybe move in there. And now, there's a motion sensor in the middle of this room. And that's why you can sort of see these red, orange waves here of this big sensor. And, you can see the yellow pips coming up. That means at the end of the next turn, basically I'm going to give you secure level 2. This is just going to keep going up and up and up. But this is more of a story mission. I've got to basically get my Cyber Knight over to a certain area to upload a file, get access to it. Here is an example of just sort of manipulating the guards. This can create a noise that will get the guards' attention and have them just turn around. And that'll allow you to move through and move up to another area and not be detected. So I'm just trying to constantly keep cover and just try to keep out of the views of cameras and motion sensors. And, that's pretty much the game, at least for the stealth part of it. And so when you activate an objective, you clearly define it. We know, okay, it's been done and it's complete, and that'll be marked off. And then they'll say, go on to your next waypoints. And here, okay, then it can extract. So I can extract at this area over here, or I can extract over this other area. So I have to sort of figure out where I want to go and sort of navigate and get my crew out of there. The mission won't end until your guys are either dead or basically the surviving team members have gotten to an area and extracted. So now is the point, things are going to be encroaching up. So I'm going to move in there, and you can see I got my guy moved in there. That the area has moved from blue to red, so I'm increasing the security now And I'm going to get guys being a little bit more active, these guards here patrolling and sort of looking around for you. And the guards, some of them sort of stand still and like they'll be guarding a typical location. Some will be in patrol mode and running around. As the security level goes up, you're going to have more of those guards that might be in static position really start hunting through. And I want to highlight too, on these maps, you'll have areas too. Sometimes you can have hackers go through and access certain things to maybe shut down certain areas or shut down security systems or like maybe decrease the level of security overall. And I'm going to show an example here of a soldier class I've got here. They're going to set up an overwatch with an automatic weapon. So they're going to cover an area here. If this guard moves into that area, then I've got a chance of shooting at them and just sort of keeping them from getting up too far and provide some covering fire as I move on through. And you can see here at this point, I don't really have any abilities. It's going to take a few turns to get them reloaded. So I'm just, burning through these security devices, and the security is ramping up. But I'm just going to try to get out of here as quickly as possible. And that's fortunately what I can do here. So this is sort of nice. It's been a game where I'm not really going to be being very proactive and taking out some guards. I'm going to just try to use a little bit more stealth, but eventually got to go loud and shoot up guys. And so that's always a big part of the game too. And sort of balancing out, how well can I go through an area and be quiet and be stealthy before I just hit maybe too many security devices or I can't bypass them or anything of that sort. And the guards are just going to start coming looking for us. So, we've got to go loud. We have to start eliminating guys as much as possible instead of trying to be very stealthy about it. But you always have a balance between those two. Stealth kills are very quiet. They're very effective, but you have that limited range. You've got to be basically right on top of them. So it's really hard to do. As opposed to firearms, which, of course, you can cover a little bit more range. It is pretty lethal. So that's a fun balance between the two. And an aspect I want to say, that's what you're trying to do with a lot of your characters here. They have a lot of abilities also to manipulate the initiative order. You might have some guards, special abilities that can make them delay or give them debuffs so they're not as accurate in attacking. They might be in an overwatch position and you can sort of scramble them a bit and they lose overwatch. So these are sort of things that you're trying to do here. Fortunately for this mission, I was able to just get it pretty quietly. Now obviously security's popped up, but I think I'm going to get my guys and basically, get them out of there. I'm just not going to even bother for a fight and we'll just wrap it up and get them extracted out. So this is the outcome of the mission I have. Gives you the cash that you get, your experience for your team members. The other thing too, it'll give you an indication of the heat. This amount of possible security that you might have coming after you later on. And of course, all the loot that I got. And the other thing too that's sort of important, this is the show here. You also get sometimes extra favors or extra rewards you get with your contact. And it sort of shows how much influence they get with you completing this mission. And that sort of opens up more options and more things that they can do. So it makes it a pretty fun part of the game. Now, there's another aspect of gameplay, which is hacking. Sometimes that these are solo missions that you can do with a hacker, and other times that this will be incorporated in your main missions. And this sort of opens up into an alternate type of game. It's sort of a little bit of a puzzle that you're trying to go through and unlock. In this case here, I have to steal a bunch of bioformula parts. And so there'd be a series of nodes that you need to get through. And, looking at your computer here, you basically have a limited amount of buffer memory for all these different computer programs that you have. So that's one thing you want to manage. So I'm looking at the scan program and you can sort of see, it takes up so much active memory for what I have. You also have a certain amount of action points that you can do for each turn. And this is sort of highlighting out what you can do. So every time you load up a program or use it, let's say I'm using this hard shell here, that cuts down the amount of actions that I have. And so this is something you sort of have to manage. On top of that, too, of course, you have the actual physical health of your hacker. That might get degraded by stuff. You also have your connection health. Whenever that drops down to 0, you'll get disconnected. And in addition, also you have your cyber deck. And so these are things you're just trying to work with. Overall, though, what you're looking at also is your security level, your quantum security level. As that moves up, you're going to have maybe programs that you disabled or ICE that you disabled reactivate security programs, or they'll unload stuff from your deck or do damage to you. And so that's what you're just trying to work through. And so in order to look through your node, you have to sort of scan it first and sort of see, okay, this is the type of program that's there, and this is what I'm going to have to counteract those programs. So I'll move through that, connect through that node, And they'll give an indication, oh, I've got this program here that prevent me from connecting. So I've got to get rid of it. So that's what I'll use to disengage it. And I'm using the scan program right now to sort of see what are these other connected nodes, what am I sort of walking into? So I've just sort of disabled that. And I'm going to move through and, okay, I need to have these other type of programs to get through these tracer and blasters. And so I'm going to make a choice there, like, what do I want to get rid of? We also have a file there. I need to download that. Well, this file isn't part of the stuff I need, but, can provide me some loot. So maybe I want to spend the time in doing that. But of course, every action that you do will increase that security level. And so I just sort of have to figure that out. And it shows here too, you end your turn, or if I hard disconnect right now, then I'll get thrown out of the system. So you're just trying to balancing those things through and work through these nodes slowly and sort of balance through the security level and how much action points you have. Constantly, you've also got that problem of memory. There's only so many programs that you can have active and running and use per turn. You're trying to do as much as you can. So showing up here, shows this node here. Okay, now I've got stuff that I have that I want. I'm looking for these bioformula parts, and this is sort of the mission goal. So I've deactivated some things, and so I'm going to go through and decide, okay, which one should I need to download or scan, sort of see what's out there, and just figure out what I have. And I got lots of action points left, and so I've gone ahead and downloaded this file there. So it shows, okay, yeah, this is what I needed, and so it gives a little cutscene to sort of show that, okay, you've been successful in getting that. And I'm just trying to loot out as much as I have possible, and that's a fun part of the game. This is part of standalone missions that you can have. It's sort of nice about these. It's a way of earning some cash. They usually generate a little bit less heat, so you don't necessarily have to worry about having greater opposition as you move into other missions. And typically, too, if something gets bad, if you get a messed up cyber deck or even a health of one of your guys, it's usually one of your guys gets hurt, your hacker. And so, you can spend a little bit more time getting them healed up and not necessarily have half your crew wiped out because you got a bad mission that went sideways and got shot up. You can see here as this is moving up the security level, you'll get problems with attacking the health of my character there. I'm getting some biofeedback that's actually sort of doing some damage to them. But this is sort of fun too, because even during typical missions, you can just try to steal loot if that's possible, or you can try to get remote access to doors and shut down barriers that give you some different avenues to approach certain areas, or even just shut down security. And then you can even have these high-level security nodes that, as you shut them down, that will actually decrease the overall security level. And basically, you're sort of hacking into the computer system of the security and saying, look, no, trust me, this is a glitch or something like that. It's not that bad. And that can sometimes buy you a little bit more time. But it's a fun little thing. Like I said, for a cyberpunk game, I think it's great to have this part of the system and part of the rules and part of the gameplay. So in between missions, you've got this a little more of a strategic layer of your base of operations and sort of managing that. And generally, they have a couple things you want to sort of look out for. One is your overall power level. That sort of shows what type of opposition that you have coming towards you. Heat, also, the idea is, the higher the heat, the more difficult those missions will be. And eventually you might get these things that are called headhunters. They're actually bounty hunters that go after you. What you're generally, too, is you're trying to manage through is also a certain amount of nano pollution that is generated. So for your upgrade of your rooms, you have a combination between power and cryogenic cooling, nano pollution that you generate. And so you have to have a specialized room here. It's a nano scrubber that will, get rid of that pollution, allow you a resource, if you will, to try to open up other rooms. And this is I've just sort of restarted a new game, so I don't have a lot of active rooms set up, but you have, say, nano scrubber here, what it's showing here, and of course trash rooms, you got to get those cleaned up. I've got a triage clinic here. You should expand it. Okay, well, I need to have that cryogenic cooling. I need to get that sort of set up and work with it, sort of expand it and increase its effect. And so I'm building a hacking station now and just cleaning up a different room. And you have some crafting in this game. You'll get these nanocubes that you obtain and also blueprint files that you can sort of steal. And so you'll have a specialized room with a bench that you can sort of do some crafting, and that'll allow you to combine some intrinsic factors, these different blueprints, to try to add little bonuses to this type of armor. In addition to that, you'll always still computer files, and it's just sort of fun that you can combine computer files to actual file sets. These sort of increase the level of the computer file and make them, a lot more valuable. And so that's sort of a fun little thing, is to get all these different various files and try to make sets if it's possible. And I've got a lot of these things that are filtered out by using in set, but you can see, okay, so I have all these files here, they're used in sets, and these, I can sell them individually, or I can just try to wait and just try to get them combined together and mint them into a new file that'll be worth a lot more for trading away for favors or for cash. And so this is a fun, another way of getting some loot there, aside from just money and from gear. Of course, you have your crew here and the barracks, and this allows you to sort of go through and manage them out. Here I have, this is my hacker, and these are different programs that I have in his cyber deck. Last mission I had, I sort of chewed up his deck, so I'm just going to try to get that repaired. You can manage your equipment, and there's a combination between melee and also with ranged weapons. And this is sort of fun, for your different weapons. There's different things that you can modify. There's barrels for your guns, and scopes and optics, and modifiers for the actual frame of the weapon. And there's just a lot of things you can get into, like the accuracy, damage. Armor shred is a big factor of that too, and maximum range. If you want to be quiet, you need to have a pistol silencer. And so these are things that you can buy or pick up or craft to sort of work on them. And same thing with melee weapons and armor. You've got like a lot of neat little options. And on top of that too, you have equipment that you can carry, like grenades or first aid equipment, or things that can help you bypass security or get rid of bodies. And you have a lot of skill trees that you can go through, and these are a lot of individual abilities that your character will have, and as you gain experience, you can branch through and work on them. And on top of that, for those, there'll be like sub-levels within those talents that will allow you to increase the time that they can fire, or they increase their distance or their effectiveness. And so that's like a lot of fun, just sort of tinkering around and trying to find a good mix. And you'll find that these skill trees are pretty fun. They'll expand through, like maybe if you're a soldier, being more effective at shooting and running on the gun, or maybe just shrugging off damage. And so that's sort of pretty fun. And on top of this too, that you have also implants and cyber surgery. So if I want to get a different class, I can get a different type of surgery that can allow me to get into, let's say, becoming a hacker. And so if I want to get that, then I can get a matrix link. So then I have this type of ability tree skills that I can work with. Where I want to get more heavier armor intrinsically in my body, I can have that done. And so this is sort of fun to have these cyber implants and messing around with those, and part of the gameplay with that. Just sort of showing through some different things that you have. And of course, ocular slot is like, these are some flat out things that you can have for increasing your accuracy. But of course, as you build up relations with those certain contacts that can do that work, then those things are sort of available for you. And so you have a combination of some different ones here. And I want to show you some aspects too, is if they get enough damage, you'll get these wounds that can cause some issue with them. And also, of course, between your loyalty and discontent, as you get more loyalty and you get more hype, those hype will give you a more positive effects, increase your intrinsic base abilities. But stress, if you get up to 100%, well, then that'll cause some other issues with you to, introduce some type of hindrance that they'll have. And of course, flat out, there's wounds that you get that persist through, that you'll have to go in and get some treatment for that. What's sort of interesting in this game too is you have, let's say, a non-player character. It's called the face, and this is what you'll use for interacting with your contacts. And this is sort of a new aspect of the game that sort of introduced recently this year. And these are some other things that can sort of layer on some more strategic options when you're working with contacts and setting up missions, and specialized leverage and abilities that you can use during a mission. So there's just a lot of little things that you can do in managing that, aside from just typical equipment and gear. There's all sorts of talents and abilities. And just sort of show out mission planning here, clicking in there. Aside from this mission, give you a general idea like what the layout is. There's all these other things that you can get, based on the face, the talent that you have, or money or contacts, using favors to try to access those things. And these will give you little benefits, like a matrix scoop. I'm going to be able to see everything when I'm in that hacking mission, or I'll cause a violent diversion, so that can get rid of some security for a while. But I have to have a positive relationship with a contact and have enough favors to call on those favors to use those sort of like a currency. And that's sort of a really fun aspect of the game in doing that. So I have my crew here. If I want to just change out the roster, change out their equipment, that can sort of show what you want to work with. And so that's a really fun aspect of the game. And of course, you have your contacts. You have these different various factions. Unfortunately, I have some here that are dead and missing. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those, or maybe some of my enemies. Filter those out. And this is sort of neat. They have different factions. They provide different abilities, different types of equipment. And, as you're trying to foster a relationship with them, you'll build up their trust and their influence, and they'll give you more of a payout, higher paying jobs, and they'll get more notoriety and be able to get more difficult missions, but definitely a better payout. And as you increase your relationship with them, then they'll open up having, more cybernetic implants that they can sell, or higher level type of files or equipment or things that you loot. They'll be willing to buy those. And that's sort of the things that you're sort of working with and balancing out. And of course, if you fail to do missions or you just try to ignore them, that builds up their exposure. And so then that will be a problem with them having setbacks. They may not be willing to sell to you, or, you can even just burn a relationship completely and they'll say, look, I'm cutting you off. I'm not going to sell you any more guns or anything of that sort. You just sort of have to balance that out, because typically what's going to have is you're going to get a point where you're going to have too many missions, too many guys that might be chewed up. They're trying to get healed, whatever. You can't effectively get a team out. You just may say, look, I can't handle a mission right now where I have to go in and kill a bunch of guys. I just can't do it. So, they'll offer you a mission and you think, maybe I'll take it, maybe I won't. And then you sort of burn through with that. And it's a nice little in-game wiki here to sort of show all the different rules and things that you have. And so that's a pretty neat system that you've got through there, at least a little in-game help. Of course, you've got a market and store, all sorts of things you can buy, different weapons. And it's a mix in the weapons too, between, you want to say primary weapons, firearms, you have melee weapons, and you also have secondary weapons. It's like pistols or maybe submachine guns. And so that can give you a little bit of flexibility when you're in a mission, you're just trying to combat between stealth and just when you need to go loud, you can go loud. And they have all sorts of little options here for filtering those through. And you can see here, of course, the range and noise that it generates, the amount of ammunition it has, like how many times it can fire before it needs to reload. These are all things you can consider. And they can all be tricked out with your mods too. So you've got things for scopes and for stocks and body foam modifications. And these are barrels that you can put onto suppressors. These are all the sort of things that you can sort of mess around with that. And that includes also with your melee weapons too. Of course, just various types of armors. And of course, tons of different items, these grenades, combat drugs, medical drugs. You've got different type of decks and programs. There's just all sorts of loot that you can just sort of tinker around with. And, as you get up enough cash and build up relationships with your contacts, you'll have more and more things that you can use to trick out. And of course, laid on top of that too is crafting. So you can craft out weapons, and armor and mods and even consumables. That's a possibility with that. So there's a lot of little things to play around with, and that makes it a fun part of the game. So overall, I've got to say, I do enjoy this game quite a bit. It's a lot of fun. As a cyberpunk heist game, it's really quite enjoyable. I love the tactical turn-based type shooting, and it's just sort of fun. You have to plan out your mission, just try to go through as careful as possible. And things go sideways and go nuts. And then you've got to go loud and just try to scramble and get what you can and get out of there as soon as possible and try to not generate too much heat. There's a lot of fun in the game. There's a lot of balance between stuff in the missions and then sort of planning those and managing relationships and these kind of things. I think it's definitely worth checking out. And if you love the cyberpunk genre, this is definitely something worth checking out.